it is. That's what the White House is. It's all of our house. So, it's an office, it's a residence, and a museum. But we wanted to always make it feel like home to whoever came through. And Mrs. Obama was very determined to do that, and I just, executed her vision of what she wanted.
Right. It's nice to be able to plan a schedule that's sane. But I know from my own experience that heads of state come and go, and that sometimes you're captive to their schedules. There was a moment for you, I believe, when the Pope came to the White House. And then after that, who came? And then after that, all in the period of a few days?
Yeah, it was a period of 5 days. We had the Pope came to visit on a Wednesday, and then the President of China and his wife came to visit on a Thursday. And then we had to go up to New York for United Nations General Assembly on a Saturday. And that was within the first 4 months of me being social secretary. So the first thing I did was call my friends and said, what do I do? I don't know how to do this. Like, what do I do? And Capricia, even when she came to the Pope, and so when she brought her family with her, and she's like, what do you need? What do you need? Where am I supposed to be? What do you need? And I'm like, Capricia, but she's like, calm down. You got it. So I think that even that day of leading up to the day and being on the day, we were there for each other. And so, and you have a great team you work with. It's not you're not in a silo as social secretary. You have a great camaraderie of State Department and White House military, Secret Service, the resident staff that really kind of help you put everything together.
I have to tell you, Deesha operates like this. You know the imagery of the duck that's paddling under the water and just gliding?
Yes.
So you just see her glide. She might be paddling really hard, but she is just gliding. She never seemed flustered. One iota. I have a very, very quick anecdote. I remember it was Mrs. Obama's birthday party, I believe, right? And that was a big deal, and I felt so very privileged to be there. And Beyonce was performing, and you noticed that Hillary couldn't see because she was trying to see, and she was blocked. And she's like, "Oh, that's okay." So Deesha takes her like between all of the light rigging and everything. She's like, "Come with me, Hillary." Takes her through, gets her like right up front. But she noticed that. She notices all of those little things, those little details, and she's just taking care of them ever so silently, keeping everything moving along, gliding. She's spectacular. She did the job incredibly well.
Thank you.
Well, in that period of time, what went wrong that nobody noticed? Because there is always something that goes wrong. And, the trick is that hopefully nobody will notice.
Oh, gosh. Capricia?
Oh. Well, I mean, should I talk about my big oopsie doodle?
Sure. Go right ahead.
I mean, mine, everybody noticed. Everybody saw it. And if you haven't seen it, I know you guys have seen it, Ann, Scott. But you should Google Capricia Marshall fall. And it's kind of funny. They all did it just before it came out. And it was like, it's a moment. They're looking at their phones and they go, ah! Because it is just so funny to watch me fall down the North Portico steps with the president and the first lady and Mrs. Obama standing next to me at a state dinner in a lovely pink Oscar de la Renta gown. I'll give you the TikTok. So we walk out of the North Portico door, and I was being ridiculous and wearing these really skinny, high Manolo heel shoes. They were really pretty. I wanted to look pretty. And that was a big mistake. And so I lead them out, and what you're supposed to do is cut left and stand to the left on the North Portico steps, awaiting the motorcade of the president and it happened to be Mexico. So we got word that the motorcade is arriving. I cut left, and my skinny Manolo heel got caught in a divot, and I went down. And so, but I didn't go flat on my face, which was a good thing. I sort of just jumped to the first step. I do a little P90X. So I had my core exercises. I went all the way down, but came all the way back up. And Miss Obama was yelling out, "Do not take that picture." Meanwhile, I was blinded by the flashlights of the 300-person international press corps in front of me and the clicking.
But she recovered.
And the president reached out. Like, the president's like, oh,
You're covered.
you know, but the military and the Secret Service are behind me, and you can just get them like, well, that's too bad. Wow. They just watch the train wreck happen. But I got back up, and the only thing that was going through my head is like, what do I do now? What do I do now? And I'm like, continue on, do what you got to do. And my the little strappy thing on the back of my heel had come undone, so now my shoes, my Mandelas are going flap, 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 flap. And I go down the steps, and there's no handrail, right?
No,
So and it's all marble. It's really super slick marble.
super
So I was
slick,
like, please don't fall, please don't fall, please don't. I go, oh, President Calderon, please. And I know the entire time, my entire Mexican family in Cleveland, Ohio is watching this, and my mother is like, oh no. Later on, I learned that she thought that I had a heart attack. She thought that something had really, really bad happened. But it was just an awful, awful thing. But the funny part of it was the next visit was with the president of Korea, Lee Myung-byung. And we're walking, I'm leading the president and Mrs. Obama out the north portico door, and the president puts his head right behind my ear and he goes, will she stay up or will she go down?
That sounds like
right?
him too.
And Michelle was like, leave her alone.
Leave her alone.
Leave her alone.
Alone, yeah.
So mine was very public. My oopsie doodle was very public.
So let's talk about career paths. And I think that's kind of what you were talking about when you were talking about the Imposter to Impact study group that you were running.
Yes.
You've had an interesting journey. We all have. Actually, we share something in common. We share a lot in common. One thing that we share in common is none of us went to finishing school. Fair to say, right? And I know there's always, certainly among the students, questions about, well, how did you get to how do you get a job like this dream job, which of course it is sometimes, but not always. So tell us about your career path.
Yeah, so thank you. I won't say I just stumbled upon it, because I believe everything is for a reason. But I went back to college when I was 28 years old, and then when President Obama ran for office and President Obama won, I said I want to work for that man. But I mean, I said the same thing about Oprah, and I haven't done that yet, so it's whatever. But I want to work for him, and so I got actually a White House internship application, and I'd mentored a bunch of young girls, and it said, passes to the young girls that you mentor that are now in college. The president is looking for interns at the White House. I was in community college. I only had 6 credits to my name, but I was like, I wonder if I could fill this out. And I said, if I pass it on to those girls, they're competition. I'm not passing this on to them. So I filled out the White House internship application myself. I got called for it, an interview, and then I got the internship in 2009. And I loved it. I was in scheduling in advance, which is the department that works very closely with all the president and first lady on all their travel and all their scheduling day to day. I loved the job. It was amazing. But when I left, I thought that was it for me. And I was okay with that. I didn't need to go back to the White House. I was like, that was wonderful. I made connections of people I knew who I can take back to my community and can really help my community. And then when I got back to my job in real estate, I was a secretary. I didn't feel the same, because I was like, wow, I just realized how much I could do with my life. I had no idea I could do that. So I was just like, what else can I do? And so I went to quit my job, ridiculously, because I didn't know how I was going to have any money. And about a week after that, the White House reached out via email and said, we have an open position if you want to return. And I was like, is this to the right person? Because, to me, I was 31, I was community college. I didn't really have, I didn't know government, but I had a work ethic, I think, and life experience that some of the other 19 and 20-year-old interns didn't have. So I got a lot of responsibility at the White House that some of them didn't get, like going on to Fort Hood when all the soldiers were shot, and I got sent to Fort Hood to help be with the families and coordinate that visit. No other intern was on that trip. So I went back, because, you just run back and figure, don't even care how much salary. I don't even think they told me. I was like, of course I'm coming back. I went back in 2010, and then I ended up getting promoted 3 times, and my last promotion was social secretary. And the reason why I wanted to be social secretary, even deputy social secretary under Jeremy Bernard, who was another part of our club, the first male social secretary, was because I wanted to be in touch with the community, and I wanted to figure out how I can welcome people. I love throwing parties. I love having people over. I love food. I love gathering. I love fellowship. And I want to do that on a level where I could go to my community and say, hey, come to the White House. Like, hey, you come to the White House. I didn't know when I was a hip hop journalist and I was a dancer that, my hip hop party days would kind of benefit me at the White House. Who knew? But Mrs. Obama's party, it came in handy. But I think that I didn't know what it was really called, So my class really focuses on using your strengths and your talents to kind of decide where you want to be, and hopefully that's in public service and that's in politics.
Right.
So that was kind of my career path.
Right. Very impressive.
Thank you.
Very.
Capricia, you were tasked by Secretary Clinton to come up with some new innovative ideas for the State Department under your aegis as protocol officer, and you came up with some really interesting initiatives. Could you say a little bit about a couple of those?
So
Yeah.
thank you. Under Secretary Clinton, she addressed in one of our assistant secretary meetings at the State Department, she really asked everyone to dig deep within the departments, that we had to strengthen our bilateral relationships, our relationships that we had with our key partners around the world. And she asked us to return to our offices and look at how else can we strengthen those relationships? What other tools do we have within our diplomatic toolbox that we could use to do just that? And so I returned back to the Office of Protocol, and we have a lot that we do. There's a visits division, a ceremonials division. We oversee Blair House. We have management. We also credential every ambassador that comes to the country. We oversee the diplomatic corps, even when they have issues, like when their children behave badly, and we have to intercede. So we had a lot going on, but I turned to them and I said, what else is there? And I asked my predecessors as well. And we have a wonderful group of former chiefs of protocol, and our dean is Lucky Roosevelt, who is the chief of protocol for President Reagan. And each of them gave me ideas of what they did during their tenure, and said, it ended after I left, but try to figure out a way that you can devise a budget and keep a lot of this programming there, because we thought that it was very, very helpful. So I did. I created this new division called the Diplomatic Partnerships Division, and its intention was to really engage with the diplomatic corps in a way that they got to know who we, the American people, are, that they could meet people within our government that would make a difference in the bilateral relationship. If you are Tajikistan, you're going to have a really hard time getting a meeting with the chief of staff. So what I created was a program called State of the Administration. The chief of staff, and the first one was Rahm Emanuel, quite a character. He agreed to be our very first State of the Administration person. And it was an hour engagement with the president's chief of staff. Every ambassador would come to these convenings. That meant there would be about 180 representatives, global representatives. He would speak for he spoke for about 40 minutes, and then it was another 20 to 30 minutes of open questioning. It was a wonderful opportunity for them to ask any question that they wanted of the administration. What are the goals? What are the objectives? And then they could cable home and say, I just had a meeting with the president's chief of staff. So that worked very much in their favor. We also created Experience America. I didn't actually create it. Nancy Brinker, who was my predecessor, already had the program developed. It's where we take we just made it a part now of the Office of Protocol with a proper budget, with staff and the like. This is a program where we would take the diplomatic corps outside of Washington, D.C. We wanted them to get outside of the boundaries, the sort of restrictions of Washington, D.C., and really get to meet the people of the United States. We're an enormous posting. The U.S. is a huge, huge posting. And again, many of these countries did not have the budget nor wherewithal to travel and get to know the people of Chicago and how very different they are than the folks of Boston. And also, we took them to Anchorage, Alaska. That's very, very different from New Orleans, from the way we speak, the way we engage, our food, the culture, but we're all American. For me, it was such a spectacular opportunity to see and celebrate the differences of our great people. And also to showcase that, yes, look at, we have a little bit of France here, we have a little bit of Mexico here, we have the infusion of other cultures in the US was another aspect that I enjoyed celebrating with the ambassadors. And a part of our endeavor then was to find new networks for them, to find new connections for them. So when we were in LA, we introduced the ambassador of Gabon to Warner Brothers, and they created a great friendship, a good relationship, and Tarzan was filmed then in Gabon because of that connection. When we were in Atlanta, the Delta met the ambassador of South Africa. The CEO of Delta met the ambassador of South Africa, and they then launched a direct flight between Atlanta and Cape Town. So there were all of these wonderful opportunities and networks that were developed throughout the time of Experience America. And we had several other programs that we developed. In particular, one that I was very, very fond of was the Diplomatic Culinary Initiative. And that's where we brought US chefs from all over and brought them into, what is the American culinary experience and how can we celebrate that and how can we showcase that our food is amazing. And it's always a part of the bilateral engagements. Always they're meeting over a coffee or a lunch or a dinner, but we wanted to raise it up. We really wanted to highlight the American culinary experience, and we did that in so many interesting ways. So that was another way that we used what we called smart power to increase our engagements with our bilateral partners.
Right. So there's this long tradition that when a new social secretary in the White House is appointed, his or her predecessors, plural, host an off-the-record lunch to share stories and prepare them for what lies ahead. Even though it's off the record, do you think you could tell us a little bit about what kind of advice, what kind of stories do you tell to the newbie that's going to aid in their survival and success?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I did. I was the last one. So I did an off-the-record dinner actually for Ricky Nacetta, who is the current Trump social secretary. And it is the highlight to me, even though we just had dinner a few weeks ago, is getting together with them. We have so much fun, and we all have so many stories, and it's such a safe space to share those stories. We don't really get into politics at all because there's just so many other juicy things to discuss. But I think that what we do is we give the person the advice from when we were social secretary, right? Which is, it's very basic, it's just like I say, always have a pair of flats, I say always make sure you eat. So those little things I think that anybody can kind of take from what we discuss. And we obviously discuss some other things that we won't discuss here, but I think for the most part, we give the general advice that the person feels like we're here as your support system no matter what. We've all been through being the social secretary. It's a very special and amazing position, but it's very heavy. It's a lot of pressure. There isn't a second, the Pope is not coming a second time. So if I messed it up on September 25th, 2015, I still remember the date because that's how ingrained it is in my head. If I messed it up, it wasn't going to happen again, So also, it's a good way for us to let off steam and just say, how are you doing? We're here for you. And it's always a lot of fun. Right. So we do that, and then we try to get together once or twice, throughout the year. So yeah, but our oldest one goes back to is Bess Abel. That goes back to Lyndon B. Johnson, social secretary. So Bess Abel is our longest living one, right? Is Bess?
I thought that Lucy Winchester is still with us. I think. Yeah.
Little sidebar here. Yeah. Okay, I want to make sure that we have time for questions, but before I open for the audience to ask questions, give us a sense of what was your most memorable, proudest moment in the jobs that you've served, both of you. What is the thing that you are going to tell your grandchildren about your role?
Well, I'll be quick so we can definitely get the questions. I think for me, and I know I keep bringing it up, but the Pope visit was really major for me, and that's because the Pope came in September. I got appointed the role in May, and I thought the role was very much like I'm throwing parties and like a few dinners, but And then it's like the Pope is coming, and I was like, well, who's in charge of that? Like, that's crazy, and they're like, you're in charge. I'm like, of what? Like the water? I mean, and they said the whole visit, and I was like, the whole visit to the White House? And we had a popular president and a popular Pope, and so it was a huge deal, and it was the first stop. And the first thing I did was go to a Catholic church and go to mass, and everybody's like, you're not throwing a mass. I was like, I don't know, what they do. And I think, I don't know. And I think that we started meetings on that visit in May, the month I got appointed, and we met almost every week with all of our counterparts, including the State Department and the Vatican, and I remember being so afraid because we had 12,000 people coming to the lawn, and 12,000 people outside. So as social secretary, the weather is like the worst. Like it almost is the worst thing that you just don't know what the weather is going to look like. And I kept thinking, oh my goodness, like the weather's going to be bad, or we're going to have a streaker who's going to like run around or something. And none of that happened, thank God. It was a beautiful day. I don't know if anybody was there, but it was a beautiful day, or you watched it. But the proudest moment I had during that was when Mrs. Obama said to me, before that, do we have music? And I was trying to be simple. So I was like, the Marine Band, that's all we're going to do. And she's like, well, do you think we should have a choir? And I'm like, yeah, definitely, I have one. But I really didn't. And so, to me, I wanted to bring a piece of home. And so what I did was I asked somebody, because we've been getting letters from all the top choirs around the country at this point, the world, wanting to perform for the Pope at the White House. What an honor. And I said, you know what? I was like, I wanted a black choir, right? Because black Catholics are not very seen. I said, I want a black choir. And someone's like, where do you get that? I'm like, I don't know. And so I asked around, and there was actually an old parish in DC, St. Augustine's, and it's an old African-American Catholic church. And I literally called them up and said, do you have a choir? And they were like, yes. And I was like, when do you rehearse? They were like, tonight. I was like, I'll be over. And I went over, I listened to them sing maybe about one note, and I was like, you're good. I was like, do you want to perform for the Pope? And that is how we got that choir. Right. And I remember they asked me what I wanted them to sing, and I asked them to sing Total Praise, which is a song very known in the African American community. And I didn't know how it would go. I didn't hear them sing it at all. And I was like, oh God. And when I remember when they stood up at the Pope ceremony in front of everybody, I was like, goodness gracious, Lord, please, if there's any time for you to make a miracle, it's now. And they started singing, and I look over, and the Pope and the president are swaying, and I was like, yes! Like, I was so happy. So to me, that was my proudest moment, because I was able to showcase this choir that no one knew, and also bring a piece of me into that. And the president and first lady trusted me to do that. And that was major, because I know she's not watching, but I really did not have a choir, So, and it was great for them, because they had no idea a week before that they were going to be singing for the Pope. And so I was able to do that for them, which to me was a big moment.
How about you?
Well,
so many stories, so little time.
There's so many stories. That was such a funny one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I very generally speaking, I love those moments of where I was standing next to the president, and there would be like the pregnant pause, and then you would hear "Hell to the Chief," and whether it was President Clinton or President Obama, you sort of watching them take on the position, taking on the weight of the presidency, and standing a little straighter, sort of bringing the chest up, and knowing that they're taking the weight of the country, if not the world, into this room, into the conversation, onto the podium with them. And I was in awe of that moment. I really thought, these are extraordinary people who have moved forward and who have led our country in that dignified
these are the things that
way.
You don't want to have happen.
We're all the dense people, like, what is that noise back there? What is that noise? Who's doing that?
Exactly. And I guess that also, as chief of protocol, one of the privileges that I had was to welcome leaders from other countries. I was the first hand that was outstretched to say, welcome to the United States on behalf of President Obama. We are so very pleased to have you. And it just always put a shiver up my spine to think about that, because that moment, that first welcoming, is so very important. And what's going to transpire thereafter will be a part of history. So those were the moments. It wasn't anything really specific, but for me it was the moments of the position and the job.
Right. You never got tired
Never.
of those,
Oh,
you know.
Never. I love that.
Yes,
I want to
right.
go back. Not now.
She does love it.
Not now. But I want to go back.
So I should say very briefly that Harvard is not the White House, but we do live in a parallel universe. A lot of times heads of state will come to the United States and they will do double, triple visits, because in some cases they have to ask permission from their government to leave the country, and they don't want to be out of the country too often. So many times a head of state will come to Washington, D.C., then to UNGA, and then sometimes to Harvard. So we have many of those kinds of visits. And we have our own protocol about that. One of the hard and fast rules about having a head of state at Harvard is that the invitation has to come from the president of Harvard, and in the first paragraph it says very explicitly to give a public address and take questions from the audience. Now, that sounds pretty ordinary and straightforward, but depending on the country, a lot of heads of state are not used to that kind of thing. And so the advanced teams will come and they'll try to renegotiate that. How many questions? Can we see the questions in advance? Our king, our such and so, is prevented by our government from making public statements. You have to there's always the negotiation. And I find that one of the more interesting parts of the job, because it isn't the glamorous part, and you do have to have principles that you uphold, because sometimes, usually the advanced team will make demands that are unreasonable or that you cannot accommodate.
No,
Does that sound
never.
familiar? Yes,
No.
right. Okay, but I'll just say that my most joyful moment sort of parallels yours. We had issued for many years an invitation to Nelson Mandela to come to Harvard and receive an honorary degree, and he was never able to come. And then in August of 1991, we got word that he would be making a visit to the United States, his last as president of South Africa, and that he would be happy to come to Harvard. Well, rules are made to be broken. We have a rule that you receive honorary degrees only at commencement. We've made rare exceptions, one for George Washington, one for Winston Churchill. That's rare. we made one for Nelson Mandela. And we got, just like you said, we got a month's notice that he was coming in August. He was coming in September. So I remember very well, I was not the Marshal at that time. I was working for the president as his staff director. And the day that my father passed away, I came into the office because there was a meeting, and I knew that the assignments would be given out. And I was determined to get that assignment because I wanted it to go well. And I planned with a small group of people, because there was nobody around. We didn't have to have committees or anything like that. We planned the event. And the event was on a beautiful day, I think, and it was, I can visualize the Tercentenary Theater where commencement is held. We deliberately put all young people in the front rows. We had the choir. We had, very few speakers. And when Nelson Mandela came out of the car, to walk into the holding room, I stood, with him, and I introduced myself, and I could feel the aura. He had an aura about him that was palpable. You could actually feel it in his presence. And I can only say that it must have come from the power of forgiveness. I mean, he had this whole dignified, but just really warm and wonderful persona. And he did say to me, actually, I didn't introduce myself. I now remember that when we were standing off stage and ready to go out, there were 35,000 people waiting to hear him. We had African drummers announcing him. And he looked at me and he said, I don't know, tell me what your name is and what you do. And the lesson that I learned from that is he was entirely focused in the moment. He wasn't worried about his speech or whether his hair looked good or anything. He was just interested, curious, about learning. It was really, it stuck with me forever. It was really a moment, and it was one of the best moments, I think, here at Harvard. We've had a lot of dignitaries come, and people still talk about that. So that's my story. I also have the good, the bad, and the uglies,
We all do.
We all do, yeah.
Well, I have to share with you that I want to affirm the aura, because we had a state visit for him when I wasn't yet social secretary. I was still assistant to Hillary, and Stack was social secretary, my predecessor, my incredibly talented predecessor. And I was given the job of making sure that he was okay in the map room.
Yeah.
And so he was waiting in the map room. It's this wonderful, elegant, historic room on the ground floor of the White House. And I said, okay, I'll stand here at the door and I won't let anybody in so he can rest and he can do whatever. So he arrived and he goes in, and it is like there is this magnificent glow about him. I was so taken by that I kept stepping out into the hallway, and anybody who came by, I'm like, you gotta feel this. Come in here. And he didn't. He was like meeting everybody. I said, oh, Mr. President, can I introduce you to? And I introduced him to all the butlers. I'm like, guys, come on. And they were so excited.
They were so excited.
But there was this aura about him that was so unique, so extraordinary.
Yeah. So we should probably allow the audience to ask them questions. And we have our own protocol here, which is that if you are going to ask a question, and we welcome you to do so, just identify yourself, keep it short, make sure that the question ends in a question mark, and I think we have microphones, but I don't know that we actually need them. Just stand up and introduce yourself, and I think that would be fine. Anybody?
Oh, so there's someone at the microphone right now.
Oh, okay. It's hard to see because the lights are shining right in our face, but is that you, Peter?
Yes, it is.
Oh, there's people queued up.
Thank you very much for being here. I was actually born at Case Western University, so thank you. And I just wanted to springboard off your last comment about new to the president, but also, or the present administration, and just ask, I don't think I've read much about, protocol in general, but like the organization of the social schedule or the chief protocol in the State Department when things are, how should I say, a bit more mercurial in the current administration. So I'm actually very curious, more on a structural level than a political one, what you guys have heard or what you think about how to operate when you have senior leadership that isn't necessarily very predictable or tending to follow normal social customs.
Well, okay.
Leave it to you, Peter, to ask that question.
I will say this. I will say that if we do our job right, you will not ever see the details, right? You won't see the details of how we do our job. You will see the job done. So even in the current political climate, I don't pay that much attention to it. I think that I hold very tight to the White House, which we had, and the diplomatic relations that we created. But I think that, for me, I don't know what they're going through. It's a different administration. Even with two Democrats, President Obama, the way that we did our White House was different from the way the Clintons did the White House. You know what I mean? So they're all different all the time. But, we would not, hopefully, some of you may have never seen me or have never known my name, but you saw the events, right? You saw the Pope being greeted. You saw, that Prince came to visit. You saw that we had children at the White House. You saw our holiday parties. So for me, we're not upfront about our protocols, and we're not upfront about how we do our job, because the job well done is done when you see it pulled off well. And I think that's what I always took from it. Like, even if I looked a mess, or even if I was running around, if I was whatever, if it looked good and the President and First Lady were happy about it, the visiting head of state was happy about it, like the Pope is swaying, they had no idea that I just got that choir like 72 hours before that. You know what I mean? You don't see those things. And so I think that that's what I would say when we talk about structured detail in this current administration. Number one, I don't pay that much attention to it. But number two, you know, we won't ever see those details, hopefully, because the details will be in the fact that it looks good and it's done right.
Anybody else out there? Yes.
Oh.
Oh, there
Go
you
ahead.
are. Okay, sorry.
Hi, my name is Lyle. I'm a junior at the college, and I liked how you said earlier about your role kind of being in charge of visual communication coming out of the White House through these events. And any sort of communication coming out of the White House is up for criticism, whether it's how an event is put on, who's invited, what happens on an event. So I was wondering how, given that you guys have put so much time into effort into everything that goes on, like how you guys take that criticism and how you respond to it.
Go ahead, Capricia.
It's what's really fascinating, as Deesha pointed out, that each administration really has its own framework and its own identity, characteristics, but we also had varying challenges. During the Clinton administration, it was the first time that they had opened up to live cameras, our receiving lines and events that were before they, just because of technology, they were unable to actually have them go live. Now, they're live all the time because everyone's filming them on their cameras, right? So it's a very different mentality. We knew when there were live cameras in the room and where it was going to go and how it was going to happen, and to be prepared for that. Today, it's a 24/7 job of just answering those questions or queries about why did you do it this way or not. But I want to affirm what Deesha also just said, was that we are professionals. And we have an objective, and we are following the administration's goals. So the president sets forth that agenda, and we go in lockstep with that. So we then affirm that through any answer we might have to get, or that we might receive from any query about, well, why did you choose this or that? Well, this is the main objective of the president's agenda. These are the things that he wants to accomplish with this policy. With this state visit, whatever it might be at the time, there was always a goal attached to it that we would revert back to, and that helped us in our execution. And people will always be critics. I was the biggest critic of myself. You know, I was like, oh, I should have done it differently. But I felt as though that was our support system. Was just we were following the president's agenda.
Anybody else?
Oh, there's one up there and down here.
Up there.
Oh, interesting.
It's YJ Kim, an Advanced Leadership Fellow. Great to see you again, Deesha,
good to
after
see
the
you again.
breakfast. Very specific question. What really happened with the Tiffany Box on January 29th?
All right. So I'll make this brief. So thank you for asking. Good to see you again. So as everything goes at the White House, you know what time somebody's going to pull up to the North Portico, you know what they're going to have in their hand, who's going to step up first, how the photo, everything is done very well. Well, Inauguration Day, I was one of the last employees left. That was my last day at the White House. I slept actually at the White House that night with the military office because we didn't know how inauguration was going to be, and I wanted to make sure I was there early enough for the tea when the outgoing president and the incoming president host a tea in the Blue Room before they go to the Capitol for the swearing in. And I was told there were no gifts at all coming, so I was like, great, no gifts, perfect. Well, that's not kind of what happened. So the car rolls up with the Trumps, and at the time the Bidens got out, greeted the Pences, brought them in. Then the Obamas went out to get the Trumps, and I'm standing in the window again, not seen. You know, I'm just looking out the window, making sure everything goes well, and I see a bright blue Tiffany's box, and I'm like, what is that box? Like, where is it going? And what to do? And so I don't want to rush out and get it. Everything's on camera, right? And at the time, I kept walking outside to make sure everything was okay, and all the press would be like, oh, that's not Michelle Obama. I'm like, no, it's another black one, but okay. But whatever. So I walk out there. So I was standing in the back like, I don't know where this box is going to go, but I also don't want to walk out there and get it, right? Because I'm on camera, and that's not maybe what the Obamas want. So then Mrs. Obama, as you all saw, took it and was just like, I don't know what to do with it. And I'm like, is now the time to walk out? I'm like standing there like, I don't know if I should go get this box. But then President Obama, being the gentleman and the amazing man that he is, took the box from her and started to walk it back in, and then I met him halfway and took the box. And then that was the end of the box. The box went in the office. I kept doing my job. That was the end of the box dilemma for me. So that's kind of what happened.
What was in the box?
It was a frame, I believe. It was a frame, yeah. But we had not known it was coming. It was just like, it was so awkward. But yeah, but we made it through, obviously. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. Can I just add a small piece to the story? I don't know the story, but just the moment that happens there. I think, Deesha, you would agree with me, there's very few of us who have experienced a real change in power from one party to the next. I was there with President Clinton when President Bush was president-elect. And there really is this extraordinary exchange between these two individuals. The philosophy of how our country will now be run is changing like that. The structure is changing. Who they're bringing in, how we are now going to engage changes really within a moment. It is that noon time where the one hand is raised and the other president is departing. And I ever so fondly recall standing in the grand foyer just after they walked into the blue room and had the tea, and everyone else was departing. And President Clinton turned to President Bush, grabbed his shoulders, sort of straightened his jacket, he fixed his tie, put his arm around his shoulder. He said, "Come on, let's go do this." And I thought, in other countries, there's gunshot and bloodshed. How lucky we are in this country to have just this beautiful moment between people who were hours earlier arguing about the path our country should lead. And they come together and lead us through this peaceful transition. And it's just a wonderful thing to have witnessed. And I think we're really blessed because not many people, there's only 3 people in the White House at that time. And the social secretary is one of them.
Hi, my name's Alex. I'm a first year at the college, and I'm just curious, like, what the most surprising thing that happened to you at the White House was.
I'm gonna take this off. Sorry.
Surprising thing.
The sound guy's gonna kill me.
Geez, I think, I'm not sure what the most surprising thing, there was a lot of surprising moments, let's be clear, for the whole time I was there, because who knew what was going to happen. But I think I don't remember a surprising moment specifically that happened. I believe there were a lot of shocking moments, like when we had the Girl Scout camp out, and Kelsey, my colleague, is from the White House, is here, and it was the Girl Scouts camped out in the front lawn. It was a really lovely event, but then a thunderstorm came, and we had to evacuate them to another building. That was a big surprise. I think that the biggest surprise, I have a good answer, actually. The biggest surprise is that I was able to do the job. Because I never knew, I never did that before. It was a surprise, because I was like, I always thought that social secretaries were from a certain pedigree, and you had to have a certain thing. So the fact that I rose to the level to be able to do that job, and I had confidence in myself, that the Obamas had confidence in me, that surprised me, right? Because I didn't know going into the job how well I could do it. I had no idea. I had no idea that, I could be leading a visit of Pope Francis with 12 to 15,000 people on a lawn with the President and First Lady. I had no idea I could do that. So I'd say that my confidence probably is what surprised me most. And that's probably not a fun answer, but I would say that is the realest answer that I could give.
And then she met the rest of us, and she realized, oh, no one had a pedigree.
So I was just like, oh, okay. So, but I think that was, and the Washington social scene is very interesting. That surprised me completely and totally. Like, I didn't know that it was as it was, and it's interesting.
I got I received quite a few sort of midnight, 2 a.m. calls. One time, it was kind of interesting. After a foreign trip, I had gone home, and I got a call from the White House operator that said, they were wonderful. You never knew who they were, but I knew it was Mary, the White House operator. And she's like, Capricia, this is the White House operator. We have the First Lady on the line for you. And I'm like, okay, and I was dead asleep. I was so tired. I was just like, oh, okay. I was like, hey, hi, Hillary, what? She goes, well, Capricia, when Bill and I got home, our room was, something had happened. Like the Secret Service had done one of their checks, but they really kind of did like a big check.
yeah.
It was not, they were not pleased. So she's going into great detail of how the room was left, and then all of a sudden my cell phone, and we had cell phones that were like that big at the time. My cell phone's going off, and my husband is like, ugh, and he's a doctor, and so he doesn't get very much sleep. So he picks up and he answers it and is like, hello, Dr. Marshall, it's White House operator. We've got the president for Capricia. And so he's like, it's the president. And so I go, but I'm talking to Hillary. Aren't they in the same bed? And so I'm like, Hillary, wait a minute, the president's on the other line. And so I'm like, hello? And she goes, Bill, I'm talking to Capricia right now. Hang up the phone. Why are you calling her? Well, Hillary, you said call Capricia. And so I'm calling Capricia. And I was like, oh, okay. And then another time, I get another incident. I get this call, and they say, this was awful. It was right at the beginning of the administration. I get a call from the usher's office. And this is a wonderful office that's in the White House. Mm-hmm. And again, I was like, it was a weekend. I was exhausted. I finally got a weekend off. And I get a call from the usher's office, and they're like, we don't know what to do. And I was like, well, what's wrong? What happened? They go, the first lady. And I said, what happened? And I was really freaking out. And they said, she's in the kitchen cooking. I was like, what do you mean she's in the kitchen cooking? And they're like, yes, she's trying to make cookies with Chelsea. What do we do? And I'm like, get her a pan. I don't know. Like, why is this my crisis? And, we just took on a lot of that, like, and I was really shocked and surprised by that level of how no longer they were real people, and that was very different people, and how the social secretary or the person who was working in the White House took on a lot of that. I don't know, you're way too young for this, but I don't know, some of the older people remember the plane that hit the White House. Do you remember the plane that crashed into the White House? I got that 2 a.m. call. We're evacuating the White House immediately. Come to Blair House. So things like history happens when you're in the White House, which is fascinating. You're right there at the footsteps. You're right there at the cusp, which is, it makes the job so delicious.
I don't think I fully grasped all that we were witness to. Like, I'm still not, like, I wake up sometimes thinking, like, oh yeah, I remember that. It just comes to you like, I was there when that happened, or I was there when Prince and Stevie Wonder were on stage together. Like, I was there. Like, I coordinated that. Like, what? Like, how'd that happen?
Those are those surprise moments.
Moments, yeah.
Well, Capricia's writing a book about her experiences, and I'll bet you have one in you, too.
Oh,
So we have time for one more question. Anybody?
She's been waiting a long
Hi,
time.
I'm Kate, and I'm an administrator and event planner at Harvard College. And I really admire your 3 careers, so it's very exciting. Thank you for being here. Yesterday, Harvard had a big event celebrating 50 years of Harvard and Sesame Street having a partnership.
Oh, yeah.
And my friend who helped plan it a bit was describing the event planning to me and said, you'd be shocked how expensive Big Bird's security detail is. And before we could move on, I made her stop and think about the absurdity of that sentence. And so I'm curious if you have a whimsical or absurd sentence that you remember saying as part of your careers, or an absurd moment that you found yourself in your 3 careers.
Yes. Well, I don't know that it was absurd. I think I created the absurdity. It was the visit of Prime Minister Cameron. And I just don't particularly understand when leaders decide to be the common guy. I get it, but it doesn't work. And so he decided to take on his first flight to the United States, British Airways, first class, but British Airways, he was going to fly in. And he was getting off the plane with his delegation, and he was a hot mess. I mean, the jacket was crumbled, the hair was, and he could tell he didn't get any sleep. And the second that he gets off the plane, of course, the phones are ringing. It's like crazy time. And he has to attend to all of this business because he couldn't on British Airways. The delegation is all groggy as well. They didn't get very much sleep, but we have to go straight. I think they had a quick stop at the embassy, but then they had to come directly to the White House for a press conference. So I do the greet, which is our custom. I went to the door of British Airways on the plank there and greeted him, and then we walked together. I mean, that's not the way it's always done. That's not the way it's done. We usually greet them at Andrews Air Force Base. It's a very elegant arrival with a red carpet and a cordon. It's really wonderful. So I get back to the White House, and I was just like, wow, Prime Minister, I hope someone's over there doing a little spit shine, because, you know, this is his first time on the global stage. Well, he arrives, and he's still kind of a bit of a hot mess. And his staff is like, you know, their eyes, and they're so tired. And so I turned to my counterpart, and I asked, he was a little like that. And I turned around and I said, do you mind if I address the Prime Minister's appearance right now? And she's like, no, go right ahead. So I'm like, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm like, can you like lick your hand and put it through your hair like this a little bit? I said, because it's all over the place. I go, and now lick your teeth, like you got stuff, like lick your teeth. And then I said, can I just tug your jacket? And he's like, okay. So I grab his jacket, like really tug it hard, and I'm like, you know, getting the schmutz off and everything. Oops, there goes my microphone. Get the schmutz off and everything. And so he's looking at me like, who is this person? But you feel like you've got to jump in. And then President Obama staying next to me goes, what about me? I'm like, oh, you're all perfect. There's nothing that we need to do with you. But you know they're about to step out on this stage, and it's their big moment, and they're standing next to the President of the United States, and in particular Barack Obama, who is so handsome and wonderful. You feel that need to step in and have that really odd moment, and I just took it. I was just like, I've got to do this for this guy.
I think for me, our last party was January 7th, and it was our last kind of like goodbye party, January 7th, 2017, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, these people have got to go. Like, you know, but you can't really shut down the party till the President and First Lady go to bed, you know, and I'm just like, aren't y'all tired? Like, I'm tired, we're all tired. But it was a bunch of people who knew they weren't coming back, most likely in the next administration. And I think the craziest moment I had was when we had we had a bacon bar, when we had different kind of bacons that we had at the last party. Shout out to one of my staffers, Christina Brody, who actually thought of that. And President Obama loved the idea. And Bruce Springsteen came up to me and he was like, do we have any more of that, the one kind of bacon? And I was like, what? And he was like, that kind of bacon. And I was like, the venison? Like, what kind of bacon do you eat? And I'm going to get bacon for Bruce Springsteen at 3:30 in the morning probably is like the weirdest thing. And he was like, thank you so much. This is the best bacon. And I was like, are you drunk? Like, what is going on here? So when I tell that story of that, and that party ended at 4:45 in the morning, when I tell that story about getting Bruce Springsteen bacon, I'm always like, what did I do with my life? Like, how was that, you know? But I was only focused on getting him bacon at 3:30 in the morning, you know, just making sure that he had enough bacon, which is weird. But yeah, we had those moments all the time. So thanks, Kate.
So thank you both for being here. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.